What you guys, got another video on 5 steps to ditch Windows for Linux. I've had quite a few people asking about some of the steps you need to take to actually ditch Windows and go over to Linux. The first thing I would say is to pick the right Linux distribution. Not all Linux versions or distros feel the same. Beginner friendly, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, more customizable, Fedora. And if you want something closer to Windows, then you can try Linux Mint. But there's lots of ways of going about choosing your Linux distro. Linux Distro Chooser is an interactive web-based tool that helps users select a suitable Linux distribution based on their preferences, experience level and hardware. It provides a guided questionnaire approach, narrowing down options among hundreds of Linux variations to recommend those best aligned with their needs. Key facts are: you can interact with the web application. Primary function is recommended Linux distributions. As you can see, the questions are pretty straightforward. They're either multiple choice or you can go ahead and choose which ones that suits you. So this website, Linux Distro Chooser, was created to simplify the decision process for users exploring Linux. Since distributions vary in interface, resource demands, and maintenance philosophy, the site asks a structured series of questions covering topics like experience, system resources, and software management preferences, and general personalized suggestions such as Ubuntu, Fedora, and Debian. So once you go through all of these questions, if you get something wrong here, it will come up with a little box saying you answered something different a little bit further back, which is basically conflicting with your choice in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this right here. So you can choose whatever you like. I'm just going to go through this and show you. I'm not particularly choosing the right options for myself, but I'm just showing you what you can do as a beginner user or intermediate user or an advanced user. So you can go through this. I'm pretty sure if you're a pretty high level tech and you already know a lot of stuff about Linux, you would probably not need to use this website. But for the beginner or the intermediate, it's going to be a good idea to basically go through this, because this will give you a breakdown at the end of your choices that you've chosen in this questionnaire. So this is a really great way of getting the right distribution for yourself. I see so many people asking that question, and I've had loads of people emailing me, leaving comments and things like that. So this should hopefully get you up and running with Linux as quick as possible. So what we're going to do is finish off this questionnaire, and then we're going to see what it actually offers me with the choices that I made. Now, some of these questions are quite important about problem solving and about the layout that you want for your desktop to look like, whether you want it based on Windows or whether you would like a more modern look like the interface on the right. So you can choose which one suits your needs. This is also important because a lot of people are not familiar with some of the flavors that Linux has to offer, and they might want something that just looks like Windows. And there's plenty of options out there that actually do that pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and go through this quickly. And there's the final result. It will tell you whether it recommends a particular distribution for you on the choices that you did in that questionnaire. And you can see some of them, it will say it does not recommend this distribution for you. So you can go through and look at the list, and there'll be a big long list of distributions that it recommends and doesn't recommend. So if you've got a particular distribution in your mind, it might be the fact that you thought, yes, I'll go for that, and it might not recommend it because of the questions that you've answered. So now we can see we do have some choices here. So obviously in the choices that I made, it's obviously offering a bunch of options for me. I'm going to have a quick look through these, and I'm going to go with their choice and choose which ones they recommend. Now, there's quite a few they do recommend, and there's obviously some they don't recommend. So there is one here which obviously they do recommend, which is Zorin OS. So I'm going to go ahead and download that right here, and we'll get that downloaded. So it's taken me to their web page, and all I need to do now is click on the download Zorin OS. There's a Pro Edition right here if you want it pre-installed with loads of applications. I'm just going to go for the Zorin OS 18 core, which has the download that I need, which is the free edition. So let me go ahead and download this. Now we are going to need another piece of software as well to be able to create our bootable media. So BalenaEtcher is something that you can use. It's super simple and it's basically free. You just download it and it will make the whole process as easy as possible. Now I've already got this installed on my PC, so I'm going to go ahead and open that application, search for the file, which I've just downloaded. There we go. It's got the USB flash drive plugged in. Click on flash and this will start to flash Zorin OS or the choice of actual distribution you chose to install on your system. So I'll speed this process up and this is going to create a bootable USB flash drive with Zorin OS on our USB so we can install it on the system. So it should look something like this once it's finished. It's going to have to validate and you should see something look like this at the end saying completed. Once that's done, we can close this off and then head over to our computer and plug it in and use it. But before we do that, the most important thing to do first is back up all your data. Do not skip this process. You need to do it before touching your system. Save your files to an external drive or the cloud, export your browser bookmarks, and note down installed apps you rely on. Treat this as a safety net, because if you don't do this step and something goes wrong, you can end up losing all your data. So back up all your data at this stage. You can use whatever software you like. The one I'm showing you on the screen is a free piece of software that will back up your computer to an external drive. I'm not going to show you how to back up your computer because I will imagine you know how to back up your computer at this stage. If you don't, then I don't know what you've been doing with your computer, because you should be backing up your data on a regular basis. If you don't know how to back up your computer, you can always check out my YouTube channel. I've got tons of videos on there on how to back up your data on a Windows-based system. So I've now plugged in the USB flash drive into my computer and we can now try or install Zorin OS onto that system. Now, if you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, I would advise you to use this option right here. For all other versions, you can just go up to the top and try and install Zorin OS. So let's go ahead and choose the top option and we'll just let it prepare itself. It's just checking to make sure there's no errors and then it will go ahead and boot up to the desktop. Now, we're not installing Zorin OS right now because that's the next important step, which I'll show you. Once we get to the desktop here, it's important. Now, once it loads up fully, you will see two options: install Zorin OS and try Zorin OS. Now, what we're going to do is try first. The reason why we need to do this first is because we need to make sure and check to see whether our Wi-Fi works and whether the sound and display are all working correctly and there's no problems, and whether you like the interface of this operating system. Once you've done all of your tests and looking at the actual operating system, are happy with your choice and it all works, you can then go ahead and proceed to install Zorin OS onto that computer. That's important because once you install, it's going to wipe your Windows operating system. We'll talk about some other options later on, like dual booting and things like that once we get to that stage. So once you're happy with your choice and everything works and you know the internet is working correctly, you can then open up a browser. I would say just surf the web a little bit to make sure it's working correctly and you're ready to proceed. Now, everything is working okay for me. So what I'm going to do is go up to the very top left-hand corner and you'll see an icon there saying install Zorin OS or whatever other version of Linux that you're trying to install on your computer. You can click on that and now go ahead and start the installation process. You can choose your language right here, and I'm going to go ahead and choose English. Keyboard layout, choose which keyboard layout you want here. Go ahead and click next. Update and other software. Again, I'm going to check mark both of those ones at the bottom and click continue. And this will start to prepare. And you'll see it starting down the bottom. So let that do its thing and it will move on to the next step. Now we can erase the disk and install Zorin OS. This is basically using the full switch method, which means you are leaving Windows behind and going to Linux on its own. This is if you want to do that option. You have also dual boot options, which I've made a video on, which I'll leave a link up the very top. You'll see a card popping up. That's if you want to dual boot Windows and Linux together. Now it's advisable to install Linux on one drive and Windows on another, rather than having them both on the same drive. But I've done two versions, one on one drive and one with two drives. So you can choose which one suits you. So a full replacement of Windows would be just clicking on next and installing and erasing the disk and installing Zorin OS onto that hard drive. Now, during the installation, there's not much more to do. You can just follow the guided installer. It's very user friendly and it's super easy to install. So if you want to go down the more difficult route, there's something else, is basically doing it all yourself, partitioning it all out. I'm not covering that in this video. I'm keeping it super simple for people that want to go over to Linux from Windows and want to ditch Windows. Once you're happy, you can click on continue. And now we're going to go ahead and install Linux onto this system. So choose your country where you are. I'm over in London here, so I need to go over to England, which is right here. And you can see it's saying London down the bottom. Click continue and then just put in your details here. And you can give yourself a password right here as well. And this will keep it nice and safe. I'm just going to use something simple that I can remember because I'm getting old. And then basically, once you've done that, click on continue and we can move on to the next step. Once we click continue, there'll be no more interaction here. It's just going to go ahead and install Zorin OS onto that drive. So all I need to do is let that finish. And now we should see something look like this: continue testing or restart now. We're going to restart now because we've just installed Zorin OS onto our system. You should see something looking like this when it shuts down, and it will tell you to remove and eject your drive. Once you've done that, you can then boot back up and then log back in to the system. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the password that we use right here. And there we are. Now you've got the welcome to Zorin OS 18, and you can go through the tutorial right here if you want to and go through this. It will explain how to navigate around the operating system if you're not familiar with it. I'm just going to click through here just to show you. It's very simple on how to use Zorin OS. It's not as hard as what people make out. But again, once we've done this, it's probably going to want to do an update on the system because it's probably a little bit outdated. So once that pops up on the screen, I'm going to let that install. Now, once we've got this far and we've got Zorin OS installed on our system, what else do you need to do? Well, you can set up your essentials, basically set up the system how you like. You can see it's now starting to download those updates when I click on this right here, and it's going to get these all updated on the system. So super simple, just let it install on the system. And basically what you need to do now is install the apps via the software manager that you want to install on that system. You can also use alternative Windows apps. So apps that you might have been familiar with on Windows, they might not be functioning properly on Linux. So you might need to choose some options that are alternative to those. So if you've been using Microsoft Office, you can use LibreOffice. If you've been using Photoshop, you can use GIMP. If you've been using Notepad, you can use VS Code or whatever it is you want to do. So there's plenty of options available for you. Just go through and I'll show you a couple here just to get you used to how to install software. You can go straight on here and this will open up the panel here for downloading our software. For instance, if you want Audacity or something like that, you can see Audacity here, which does work on Windows and it does work on Linux. You can go ahead and click on this and click install, and it will go ahead and install Audacity onto your computer. Maybe you want some other software on here. So you just go through and have a look at the extensive list that they have. And you can also do a search for particular types of software that you want to install on here. So let me go ahead and quickly show you the installed apps we have here. You can click on the installed ones and it will show you all the installed apps that we have on this system already. So you might need a few more applications to get up and running. Maybe you want a picture editor or something like that, or maybe you want some graphic software to do your imaging like GIMP or something like that to replace Photoshop. You can go ahead and install that right here, and this will go ahead and unpack it and install it onto the PC. Next, you might want some other software here. So let's go ahead and do some other software just to show you how this works. And you can click on install. Now, I'm not going to go into wine or bottles in this video, but if you want to use Windows or based software, you can use bottles or wine to get that installed. And some people might go down the route of installing VirtualBox on here as well, and you can basically do that as well if that's what you want to do. I'm not into the VirtualBox experience inside Linux, but just familiarize yourself with Linux itself. It's not as difficult as people make out. You can use it as your daily driver. Obviously, if you have really sort of mission critical software that you must use inside Windows, and it's your bread and butter, and you basically do maybe music or something like that, and it doesn't do that inside Linux, then you might need to dual boot into Windows so you can use that software. Unfortunately, it's not always Linux's fault. It's sometimes to do with the software companies that are just not supporting Linux, or it might be something to do with other reasons why. So you can just basically get all the software you need. Once you've got all your basic software, like for instance screen capturing or snapshots, or whether it'll be remote software or whether it be video playback, you can go ahead and get all that software installed on the system, and you should be having a pretty easy experience of using the PC. Especially if you've got an old computer that is not compatible with Windows 11, Linux will work perfectly fine on that computer. You don't need to throw it away. So if you're one of these people that do a bit of email and do a bit of YouTube, looking at YouTube, and also maybe just browsing the web and basic stuff like that, then Linux is going to be an ideal option for you rather than throwing your computer away. Now, of course, you can also use unsupported hardware method on Windows, but you don't know when Microsoft are ever going to close that window, which they probably will eventually. And of course, this is going to give that old computer some longevity. Now, there's obviously a lot of debates about how this can speed up your computer. I mean, the computer is still old at the end of the day. If it's an old computer, it's still going to be old. It's not changing anything. The hardware is the same. All you're doing is changing the operating system. But these OSs are optimized for older hardware to make it feel a bit more responsive. Anyway, but that said, my name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Hope this video has been some sort of use to you. Let me know in the comments section down below, and I shall catch you in a very next video, or I'll see you on our Discord server. If you haven't checked it out, check the links in the video description. Bye for now.